"Please don't do this." Her voice cracked against the roar of the waves. The officer's grip didn't loosen. With a chilling calm, he dragged her across the pier, rope cutting into her wrists. Then, without hesitation, he shoved her into the dark water, tying her to a buoy like she was nothing more than discarded cargo. The ocean pulled at her body, salt burning her lungs as panic set in. Alone, helpless, forgotten, or so it seemed. Because what happened next, no one on that shore could have predicted. Would she be swallowed by the sea, or saved by the unlikeliest of hands? Before that night on the pier, Aaliyah Johnson was just a 27-year-old woman chasing ordinary dreams. She worked double shifts at a diner, saving for nursing school, and every spare minute she could, she called her grandmother to check in. To her neighbors, she wasn't just the girl next door. She was the one who would help carry groceries or stop to play jump rope with the kids on the block. Life wasn't easy, but it was steady. And for Aaliyah, steady meant safety. She had learned to stay out of trouble, to keep her head down in a world that didn't always see her humanity first. But that evening, safety unraveled. A late walk by the harbor, something she often did to clear her mind, turned into an encounter she never could have imagined. The blue and red lights flashing behind her weren't unusual in her neighborhood. What was unusual was how quickly the tone shifted. "Where are you going this late?" the officer demanded, his flashlight harsh against her face. She answered calmly, respectfully, just like she'd been taught, but respect didn't matter that night. Something in his eyes told her this wasn't about a simple question, it was about control. And as the minutes dragged on, Aaliyah's world was about to change from ordinary to unthinkable. The officer's questions started like routine stops Aaliyah had seen 100 times, but something about his tone was sharper, colder, less about curiosity, more about power. "Out here alone, this isn't safe," he said, circling her slowly like a predator sizing up prey. His flashlight beam lingered too long, not on her face, but on her hands, her hair, her skin. Aaliyah tried to stay calm. "I'm just walking, I live nearby." But instead of easing, his suspicion hardened. "Nearby, huh? Funny, you don't look like you belong here." That word belong, it cut deeper than the night air. She had heard it before, in stores, at school, on sidewalks. A single word that said, "You're not welcome, you're not safe, you don't matter." When she reached for her ID, his hand shot out, gripping her arm too tightly. "I didn't tell you to move." Her heart hammered. She wasn't resisting, she wasn't fighting, but to him, she was already guilty of something unnamed. Moments blurred together. The radio at his shoulder crackled. His breathing grew heavier. And then, without warning, he pulled rope from the trunk of his cruiser. "Wait, what are you doing?" she cried, stumbling backward. He didn't answer. He tied her wrists with a cruel efficiency, ignoring her pleas, her tears. Each knot was a verdict, each pull of the rope a sentence. Her voice cracked. "Please, I didn't do anything, I'm not a threat." But his silence said everything. In his eyes, she was Aaliyah Johnson, the woman who dreamed of becoming a nurse. She wasn't someone's granddaughter, she wasn't even human, she was just disposable. He dragged her down the pier, the wooden planks echoing beneath their footsteps. The salty wind whipped against her face, and the dark water below churned like an open mouth. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed, but the only response was the scrape of the buoy chain against metal. And then, in a moment that felt torn from nightmare, he bound her to the buoy and pushed her into the water. The shock of the cold sea stole her breath. The ropes dug into her wrists as she struggled to keep her head above water. Every wave crashed against her body like a fist, threatening to drag her under. She screamed, but the sound vanished into the night. The shore grew smaller, the officer's shadow fading until he disappeared entirely. She was alone, helpless, drifting. But just when the hopelessness settled in, when her mind whispered that this was how her story would end, a distant rumble echoed across the water. A low, steady thunder that didn't belong to the sea. At first she thought it was her imagination, but then, through the darkness, a light appeared, a spotlight sweeping the waves. Something massive was cutting through the ocean toward her. Could it be rescue? Or something even worse? The waves slammed against Aaliyah's body, each one a reminder that the ocean didn't care whether she lived or died. Salt water strung her throat, her lungs begged for air, and the ropes cut deeper with every frantic movement. She screamed again, but her voice was swallowed by the storm of crashing waves. Her mind raced with memories, her grandmother's smile, the laughter of kids on her block, the notebook where she scribbled plans for nursing school. Would this be all that was left of her? A life silenced, erased, forgotten in the dark. Then boom, a spotlight cut through the night sky, blinding and brilliant. The rumble of engines grew louder, closer, until the silhouette of a warship loomed over her like a steel mountain. Voices shouted above the roar of the sea. Ropes unfurled. A small rescue boat hit the water. "A woman, she's tied out here," someone yelled. For the first time since the officer dragged her away, Aaliyah felt a flicker of something stronger than fear. Hope. But it wasn't over. Her body was numb, exhaustion clawing at her muscles. The waves pulled harder, dragging her under. She choked, coughed, and fought to lift her head above the water. "Hold on," a voice bellowed. "We've got you." She saw the rescuers closing in, their arms reaching, their faces etched with urgency. She tried to scream, but only a weak gasp escaped. Her vision blurred. The sea pulled her under one last time. Darkness surrounded her. And just before her world went black, she felt hands grab her, lifting her from the water. The fight for her life wasn't over, but the tide was finally turning. When Aaliyah opened her eyes, the world was blurred by harsh white light. She was wrapped in blankets, an oxygen mask pressed to her face, and the steady hum of medical equipment filled her ears. She was alive. The sailors who had pulled her from the water stood nearby, their faces a mix of relief and disbelief. But survival was only the beginning. When the truth of what happened spread, how an officer had bound a black woman and left her to die, outrage rippled far beyond the harbor. For some, it was another headline in a long line of injustices. For others, it was the first story that broke through their silence, forcing them to confront a reality they could no longer ignore. For Aaliyah, the scars went deeper than rope burns and bruises. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the officer's voice, felt the cold water swallowing her whole. She survived, yes, but she carried with her a truth many already knew, that survival, for people who look like her, too often feels like defiance. Her story became more than her own. It became a mirror showing us how quickly humanity can be stripped away when prejudice holds the power of a badge, a rope, or the law. And now the question falls to us, what will we do with that reflection? Will we turn away, pretending it was just one night, one officer, one story? Or will we confront the uncomfortable truth that Aaliyah's near drowning is not an isolated horror, but a symbol of a deeper current that has dragged too many lives under? Her survival was a miracle, but justice, that's a choice. So I ask you, if the sea itself fought to keep her alive, what excuse do we have to stay silent?